Welcome to Daily Success. Listen in on these personal conversations with today's leaders, innovators, and influencers as they discuss daily success principles, systems, and solutions. Get ready for Daily Success. Now, here's your host.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Inthirani Arul. Inthirani's passion to serve and empower vulnerable populations began at age 9 while caring for her blind diabetic mother who suffered from mental health issues. Through intuitive divine guidance, Inthirani's mother's life was saved after many life-threatening medical emergencies. With sentiments and devotions, she discovered her purpose for increasing longevity for humankind. Founder of SoulPath Inc, two-time author, and an ambassador for women of global change, Inthirani devotes her time to her own growth through self-assessment so she can serve with an impact and outcome. She graduated with distinction from Dale Carnegie's public speaking and human relations training and is a natural healer with the gifts of empathy, sensitivity, perseverance, and compassion. Welcome, Inthirani.
Thank you, Tammy, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Today, I want to talk to you about communication, and I had to laugh as I stumbled on Dale Carnegie's public speaking because obviously communication is so vital to our lives each and every day. So it's really a pleasure today for the two of us to focus on communication. So to get started, can you give me just a real simple definition of communication?
Yes. Communication is really about its language. It's about the interpretation of it can be in the form of nonverbal, written, oral, and it's in its expression of what we want to say.
So today, you expressly wanted to talk more about communication. Why is communication so important to our daily lives?
Well, communication is vital in our daily lives because we have to communicate everywhere we go, and it's all because everywhere we go it's there's people, and it's engaging with the people and really expressing ourselves in a way that we're being heard and that they're being heard as well.
When you say that, you said it's so important to be heard and also for other people to feel like they're being heard. Do you have any tips about how to make somebody really feel like they're being listened to?
Yes. A really good way to have that feeling of being listened to is by just being silent and hearing what the other person is communicating, observing through their expressions, through their body language, through their nonverbal communications, and how they interpret. What they're interpreting through that language.
With that said, when you're talking to somebody, and this is really kind of interesting, when you think about how communication has changed, you talked about, for example, talking to someone and observing their body language, observing them. So many people today it's almost like they're afraid to communicate either verbally or audibly, and they revert to texting. What is that all about? Have you thought about what is the shift in communication, and how do you communicate with people when they're literally texting you and trying to have this important conversation over, short written messages where there is no context?
So I find it really challenging myself, because I really like it. The words, sometimes it's our interpretation. How are we perceiving those words? Because every one of us perceives words in different ways, according to the way we were brought up, through our own interpretations of language, and through our own emotions. So, it's not always easy to interpret what someone is actually expressing through a text, because we're really not understanding their emotions, how their facial expressions are, what they're really conveying, and it could be misinterpreted many times.
I'm chuckling to myself because people think that if they send the emojis, that they're conveying their emotional state. And of course, there's some emojis that you would not, to me, I wouldn't intuitively know what certain things would mean. So in this world that we're living in, and of course, part of this may be generational too, because younger people have been brought up literally with a cell phone or a tablet in their hands. I mean, if you look at little babies, people, they give them a phone or a tablet. And I've even seen videos where these babies are like, it looks like they're having drug withdrawals. They're throwing conniption fits, over the fact that somebody took away the cell phone, and then they're handed the cell phone, and then all of a sudden they're all happy again. Do you see that our communication patterns, if you were to try to educate people today, like who have small children or who are teenagers or 20-somethings, how would you talk to a parent, say, about communication skills and the developing child with the way things are today? And like I said, people using that cell phone as a pacifier. I mean, how do you talk to people today to help them understand that they're actually changing their children's brains with these electronic devices?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It is definitely a changing world. Everything is in the form of, social media. It's all in the form of, texting and all this electronic communication. And what I would really share with parents is to really take some quality time, where, like, maybe it's at dinner time, where you really, there's no texting, there's no none of this material, electronic devices, where you're actually just communicating and getting to know that family member or that friend or whoever it may be. It's to always keep that connection, because it is so vital in our everyday life, to have that connection of, to have that connection with the emotions of the other person, because without that emotional connection, there really is no true communication. Like the true depth of communication cannot exist. And so I strongly recommend to find opportunities in everything you do where you have that personal communication with that other person.
So thinking back to this, the text messaging and everything. For example, in my own family, I have two sons, and very rarely do they ever actually call me on the phone. It normally is a text message. And if I want to connect with them, I need to, text them. Like, my biggest one is, where you, that always comes out, where I, because of my fat fingers, because I like to know where they're at, just so I don't have to worry. So in this world of, how do you make these human connections? Like, I like the idea that you said, like at dinner time, get rid of the electronic devices, because that then forces you to look at the people that you're eating with. But so many people, they don't actually sit down to dinner anymore, and there needs to be a resurgence of that, sitting around the table and eating dinner together, even if it's only, 15 minutes, for that communication. So how do you reignite the wanting to actually talk? Because, like I said, I don't know if children, because they start at such a young age with their telephones and their tablets, that they get rewired into communicating via text message, or if it's just easier to text. Like you said, there is no emotion conveyed in a message, just like emails. People always will misconstrue the meaning of the written word, and normally people will always put the negative spin on something and a tone when there is none. Like I've had people think that I had a tone to my email when it was like just a sentence, and there was no tone. It was just a blatant sentence that meant exactly what it said, whatever it was. How would you suggest that you make that shift, even if it's not for everything, but at least with maybe your family members, so that you're communicating with one another, showing that love and that emotion?
Yes. So are you asking when, or say that?
What are some ways? I know that you've done a lot with, for example, with Dale Carnegie's public speaking, and you've had human relations training, and of course you've written some books about self-awareness and self-love. I'm just really curious because, again, I'm recognizing that this is an issue, a problem to me, because it's like people, my phone never rings. I get text messages, but my phone, actually, I don't get a lot of phone calls. I get text messages a lot. And again, there is no emotion connected to some of these things. I mean, if I heard on the radio the other day, for example, it was people talking about Thanksgiving and whether or not they were going to send a text message to someone saying Happy Thanksgiving, or if they were going to call them, because people consider talking on a phone to be a much more intimate exchange, and they only wanted to talk to people they cared about, not to people they really didn't care about. And so I thought that was interesting, that people actually make a distinction between the intimacy level of talking or communicating via voice versus communicating via the written word or text.
Right.
So do you think there is a real distinction that people are moving away from communicating by voice? And if so, what does that mean for our spiritual selves?
Right. Yes. In this day and age, yes, it is moving away from, verbal communication, because everything they do in school even is like, it's through either text or it's email or it's, it's written. And and not a lot. It's not as it used to be, where it was all verbal, and or mostly verbal, and the second question was.
Oh, I think I'm just like having these moments of realizing that how in the world do we stay connected spiritually with other humans if we never talk to one another? And I guess my question really boils down to our soul self and our communication with others. Are we getting, because of the trend of going to electronics, are we harming our spiritual connections? Or is that going to force us to become more spiritual?
Right. I believe there's not, the world is evolving. I mean, things will always evolve. It doesn't matter. It's just part of life. And it's us evolving with that, and really, trying to figure out how can we keep that emotional connection with other people, because every person is a human being, and it's up to us to figure out how are we going to keep that connection with each person, with every other person on this planet. And because we all are spiritual beings, we are part of that divine connection, and it is our responsibility to really connect with every, with those that we're communicating with, and it's to find that way of, like, how are we going to connect with them, and it's to find that for ourselves, and to evolve with that.
I think that's really interesting when you think about that, because again, the world obviously is changing. So do you think that the technology helps us to go to a higher consciousness, or keeps people down at a lower consciousness level?
I believe that it can be seen both ways. There is a level of lower consciousness level because we're not attached to that emotion. But at the same time, it pushes us to really find ways to communicate even better, like find better ways of communicating. So it's constantly changing. And we started off with the record player, and then it turned into a cassette player, and then, or 8-track, and then there's a cassette player. It just keeps on evolving, and it's us getting used to figuring out, how am I going to, understand this, and how can I connect? But we're talking about human beings, and it's about really elevating ourselves to really figuring out how can we keep that human connection with that person.
So as I understand that you have participated in a lot of scientific experiments related to life force energy, biofield energy. So how does communication affect our divine relationship? And again, I think I'm shifting away from the human to human communication, and more now I'm interested in that communication between your spirit or your soul and the divine or the God of your understanding, nature, whatever you're calling that natural life force energy. Can you talk a little bit more about communication and that soul connection?
Yes. So communication is really about our own self-assessment. It's that getting to really understand who we are as a person or as a being, and it's to realize that we are a being, and it's about continuously elevating that consciousness level through that self-assessment, through the how are we being pure? Are we, is about having that respect for ourselves, being caring to ourselves, because it all starts from within. It's about having that integrity and that respect, and caring and having that gratitude. It's really about interpreting all of that within ourselves, because everything comes from within. What we're seeing on the outer world is all because of our inner world, is our own perception from our inner world, and it's through the elevation of our own level of understanding and a knowledge of the divine knowledge, the wisdom that comes through nature, to have that understanding of how nature works, and to come from that deep level of understanding, that we can really become more spiritual and elevate ourselves as, to be able to communicate through that divine connection. It's that deservingness, is when we go inwards and we do the work, that we become more deserving of that connection.
So part of the work that you do, you actually help people to get connected to the divine or the God of their understanding or nature. So when that happens, what are some of the benefits that being connected to life force energy, what are some of the benefits to that?
So the benefits are enormous. There's a level of fulfillment when we have that kind of deep connection. Things will flow more effortlessly, and you can, you feel that I have this understanding that everything is happening for a greater reason. It's for this evolution of our soul. And it's not because of me. It's not because we all have an ego, and it's not because of, it's not because of me. It's because of the evolution of my soul, that all, whatever experience or whatever communication that comes to me or whatever it is that happens is for the evolution of the soul. And to have that experience, to evolve, to become more higher, to have that higher level of consciousness, and to elevate that depth that exists within us. And it's through that depth that we can really communicate ourselves through our own language and our own self-expression to become, whatever it is that we, whatever it is that we're wanting to achieve in our lives. It becomes more effortless.
So when you're connected to the divine life force, you definitely can feel the difference between being disconnected versus connected, just by the ease of how things flow and the communication in general of your life forces. And it's interesting because the more that we've talked about communication, I'm sitting here listening to you, and we talked about the human communication, and now we're talking about the spiritual communication. And when you think about the life force energy and, the connection between a human spirit, soul, and life force energy, it's kind of interesting because if you think about communication, our whole body is one big communication factory when you think about it. Because if you think about our brain and our mind and our body and our heart and our cells, everything is communicating about, just constant. It's like 24/7. We're in constant communication, all of, micro, cells and everything. And then, of course, it goes out into the bigger picture of us as individuals connecting with other individuals, and that we're all connected in this divine life force. So it's so big, this idea of communication, and we've only kind of, we picked out a couple little points of it. And I'm just thinking about, wow, how little it really, our conversation is just so small in the scheme of how much communication is happening. Well, right now as we speak, our bodies are, communicating about, whatever they're doing at this moment in time. And we're connected. We're like 3,000 miles apart, yet we're speaking to one another in this interview. And then the people who are listening are all over the world. And yet, so we're all connected, and we'll be, because of the recording,
right,
we'll still be connected even after we're done in real time. So it's kind of mind blowing when you start to think of, you start to actually think about communication in a different perspective. It's not as simple as, oh, I don't like to be texted or emailed because I don't understand what you're trying to say to me. It's so much bigger than that. What do you think about that, Inthirani?
About the texting?
About the bigness of communication, the universal communication.
Absolutely. There's so many levels to communication. It's just, as you said, it's enormous. We have only touched on a very small area of it. It's in every aspect of our lives. There's communication that's occurring. It's within our body. It's in our, it's within our society. It's how are we, interpreting things. It's just, it just keeps on going out, and it's a ripple effect as well. It can create a ripple effect. Communication creates ripple effects, how things are communicated or how it's interpreted, and every action has a reaction, and every word, it has an interpretation. And yes, absolutely, I totally agree that it's a huge area to cover.
Well, we'll have to talk again another time, because I know you have such a rich background of, so many things, between the life force energy healing and science and the soul path and the self-esteem and the books you've written. I mean, we can always have great conversations. So before I let you go, I just want everybody to know that you can reach out to Inthirani at Inthirani.com, and that's INTHIRANI.com. And her website has all kinds of really cool information about the science of life force energy, different programs that Inthirani offers, and some cool blogs and some scientific research. Before I let you go, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, just that, just always be open to communicating and learning and growing yourself as to be the greatest communicator that you can be. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Inthirani. Everyone, this is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
You've been listening to Daily Success. Tune in again and subscribe. Never miss a moment of daily success.